Hello IFT aspirants. This video is going to give you an insight into how to crack the IFT examination. Split into a couple of slides. Let's take a look at the plan. The first slide will take you through the basics of IFT as an organization, as an institute. Then of course we talk about the test pattern with particular emphasis on the last year's pattern. After that we have some slides on sample questions which have been taken from the previous year's IFT examinations. And then we wind up with an insight into the preparation strategy. Let's start with the first slide, introduction. IFT was set up in 1963 by the Government of India as an autonomous organization to help professionalize the country's foreign trade management. In fact, it is one of the premier institutes offering a program in international business. The institute offers a variety of programs, both full-time, executive and certificate. But the flagship program is a 2-year MBA in international business. And this is the program which is in demand in the management community. Admission to the program is on the basis of a written test, an essay write-up, a group discussion and an interview. This video specifically focuses on the written part. Let's look at the test pattern. What has been the pattern in the last few years? What are the areas which are important for the aspirants targeting the IFT examination? The test has been in fact traditionally conducted in the month of November every year. IFT over the years has been experimenting with the number of sections and the number of questions. In fact, these are the two important parameters of any test. If you look at the number of sections first, we have even had 6 sections in the test of IFT. And I'm talking about the year 2009. After that, 2010 onwards, we've had 4 sections consistently. The number of questions has also seen a variation. Going back to 2009, the number of questions then was 150. And if you look at IFT 2014, the number of questions was 118. Again, if you look at the number of questions, it has been over and above 120 in all the years barring 2014, where it saw a dip to 118. One of the rare exams with differential marking per section. This is one examination, one test, which has seen different sections being given different weights. And more so, even within the same section, we've had cases where the section was split into subsections. For example, if you look at 2014, we had the verbal section including 2 parts, one on verbal ability and the other on reading comprehension. Then also we have seen combinations of DI and LR in certain years, where I'm talking about 2009 in particular. We've also had cases where DI was merged with the quant section. I'm talking about 2014 here. So different combinations have existed over the years, and differential marking has been one of the key differentiators of this test. General awareness has been a very critical section in the IFT examination. And we'll appreciate it in subsequent slides that how this section has stood out in the scheme of things and how this becomes critically important for the test takers. Cutoffs have been generally on the lower side. On a scale of 100, we have seen 45, 50 being a good performance in terms of marks to be shortlisted for the GD NPI rounds. Let's take a dig into IFT 2014. The test was paper-based and spanned across 2 hours. Now, this is one parameter which kind of differentiates it from the CAT. Whereas the CAT has transformed to become an online test, IFT has been a paper-based test. No sectional time limits. Now, this is one parameter which is a double-edged sword. If you look at the plus side, the student gets to approach any section as a priority section. If you look at the downside, then that freedom which the student gets is difficult to manage. So we have seen cases where the student keeps on hip-hopping from one section to another in respite of an easier and more manageable section. Negative marking has been consistently 1/3 of the allotted marks. This is again where it differentiates from the popular CAT, where negative marking has been around 1/4 of the allotted marks. The number of questions in IFT 2014 was 118, spanned across 4 sections. Talking about the sections, let's look at section 1. Section 1 was in 2 parts. On one side, we had data interpretation with 15 questions, 1 mark each. On the other hand, we had the quantitative ability section with 20 questions, 1 mark each. So put together, we had 35 questions in this section with 35 marks. The DI section saw questions which were intensive in terms of calculations. Questions were typically designed around bar graphs, pie charts, and data tables. On the other hand, the quant section saw questions designed around real life situations. The questions were lengthy and they had a variety of topics reflecting all the 4 modules of maths: arithmetic, algebra, geometry, and modern maths. Section 2, as I said a while back, this is the critical section for IFT. This is what differentiates it from so many other tests, including the CAT, the general awareness section. In 2014, this section had 26 questions with half mark per question. And one could see a skewness, a bias towards current affairs. Though I think over the years we have had a mix of both static and current components of general awareness, 2014 in particular saw a dominance of questions on current affairs. So this becomes an important area of concern for the test takers. Section 3 was again in 2 parts. One on reading comprehension with 17 questions, 1 mark each. The other on verbal ability, 20 questions, 0.75 marks each, which makes it RC being scaled on 17 marks and verbal ability being assessed on 15 marks. Put together, we had 37 questions, giving you 32 marks there overall. RC had 4 passages. The passages were easy to read and the questions were direct. Verbal had questions on all popular areas of usage and grammar, including analogies, fill in the blanks, jumbled sentences, and the typical verbal questions. Section 4 was on logical reasoning with 20 questions, 1 mark each. This section had questions which were average plus in terms of difficulty level, and the questions were lengthy to read, and one could see this section standing out, not being merged with DI, which was I think a practice for the last few years, and this section had a weightage of 20% in the overall scheme of things. Overall, 2014, a good attempt would have been around 50 plus questions with 40 to 45 marks. I think this should have been a good performance for an IFT candidate. 2015, the test is scheduled to be held on 22nd November. As per the notification, it will be a paper-based test for 2 hours and questions will be based on the following areas: English comprehension, general knowledge and awareness, logical reasoning, and quantitative analysis. But what one has to see is whether sections will have subsections, whether we have the DI being combined with the quantability part, or would it be merged with the logical reasoning part. We have to see whether general knowledge will have more bias towards current-based questions or more towards static areas of the section. We've taken certain sample questions, and this would give you an understanding of the kind of questions which have been there in the previous IFTs. Again, these questions would not give you a complete understanding of the sections, but we have just randomly picked up certain questions to give you a flavor of the test. Let's look at verbal ability. Verbal ability, for example, this question was there in one of the tests. Which of the following options has both words spelled correctly? Now, one could see in the options that they are slightly tricky, and these are words which are used on a day-to-day basis, but possible that you miss the grip there and you're not able to hit the right option, which is B in this case. You could see that perceive and believe. This is the pair of words with the correct spellings. Then, of course, there was a question on fill-ups. You would appreciate that out of the 4 options given there, 2 of them, option 1, that is option A, and option D, these have been spelled incorrectly. So obviously, these are out of the consideration set. The ones in the consideration set are B and D. Now, if you look at the statement, it goes on to say, Mrs. Kapoor hovered around the patient in a display of great dash. So, between chivalry and solicitude, solicitude fits in better because the meaning of this word is care or concern for things, which is more relevant in the given context. So, we'll go for C as the right option. Logical reasoning. One has seen questions on different aspects of reasoning. For example, we had this question on completing the series. You would see that the 4th dimension is missing here. And if you look at the words more carefully, you'll probably see that the first letter of every option has skipped the letter in between. If you compare 2 consecutive options, for example, if you compare EPFS and GPHS, F is missing there as the first letter. Between GPHS and IPJS, H is missing. So similarly, you would appreciate that K should be the first letter of the correct option, which means that options A and option C are ruled out. So now the 2 options in the consideration set would be B and D. Going further with the analysis, you would see that the second letter of each of the words there is P, which is there in both the options. So we move further down with the analysis. The third letter, F, H, J. Again, we have seen 1 letter being skipped there. From F to H, G is missing. From H to J, I is missing, right? Similarly, if you look at J and N, so we have L is the missing part, which means that the third, the answer is going to be option number D. Quantitative ability has seen typical questions on different areas of maths, arithmetic, algebra, geometry, modern maths. But what we have seen is, over the years, modern maths has been a consistent section, a consistent area of questions in this particular section. Anyways, this question here has been taken from mixtures and ratios, and if you look at the question more carefully, I think in less than a minute you'll be able to decide that the answer is option number B. It's a simple question which is based on the basics of ratio and mixtures. General awareness. Now, general awareness, one has seen a diversity of questions. For example, this question is from corporate awareness. Since you are targeting to make a career in the management domain, some kind of environmental sensitivity with respect to business organizations is mandatory. And this question kind of captures the gist of what I just said. Lifebuoy is a brand of soap marketed by which of the following companies? The ones who are more vigilant, who are better off in terms of their observation, they would appreciate that option number D, Unilever, is the answer. Then, of course, we had this question on Ebola virus disease, which was, a big shocker a couple of years back. and it took everybody by surprise. And I'm sure there were so many articles in the news, and they did talk about this virus being named after a river. So the question was around the Ebola river, and it went on to ask that the river is located at which of the following places. Had you been more vigilant there, had you been more careful in terms of your reading habits, you would be able to hit option number B, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, as the answer. Let's look at the preparation strategy. What should you therefore do preparing for this particular test? If you look at a very sectional dimension of the test, you would possibly be able to split it into three parts: concept driven, practice intensive, and environment sensitive. The minute you do this, it will give you an approach. It will give you a sequence of steps to prepare for this particular test. For example, let's look at the first challenge: concept driven. What is meant by concept driven? Concept driven means that unless you're aware of the concept for that particular question, you cannot touch the question. Right? For example, a question on geometry talking about cyclic trapezium. Now, you cannot touch the question unless you're aware of what is a cyclic trapezium. Similarly, there are certain rules of usage and grammar which one has to be aware of before he or she attempts a question on verbal ability. So quantitative ability and select areas of verbal ability, these are concept sensitive. So we suggest that you should be comfortable, familiar with these concepts before you take on this particular test. The next domain would be practice intensive. There are certain dimensions of the test which are based on intensive practice. So unless you have rehearsed across similar questions, the comfort level would not be there. Here I'm talking about two areas: data interpretation and logical reasoning. We suggest that you should practice across pie charts, tables, bar graphs, line charts, should be able to understand standard forms of data representation. And then, of course, the challenge within each of these is understanding the data and then processing it. So I'm talking about two dimensions in DI. One is effectiveness and the other is efficiency. Similarly, we look at logical reasoning, and we are able to appreciate that unless you have practiced across similar sets of questions, your proficiency, your efficiency will not go up. So these are domains which are more dependent on practice. And then, of course, I've been stressing it throughout the clip, throughout the video, that general awareness is a critical section. It is environment sensitive. Now, the environment is huge. Where do we therefore start from? Is there a starting point for me as a test taker? Yes. The starting point is to split this vast environment into two subcomponents. One which is reflective of current events, and the other which captures the essence of static components of awareness. For the current events, we recommend that you should be regularly reading the newspaper with particular focus on economy, polity, and business. And for the static components, we have a slide subsequently where we have tried to capture the key areas which you can possibly prepare to do well in this particular section. Now, we have a huge concern there. Is there a difference between the CAT and the IFT examination? If we look at the areas which are being tested, yes, the only difference there is the general awareness section. Barring which, if you look at other areas, verbal ability, reading comprehension, data interpretation, quant ability, logical reasoning, all of these, I think they overlap in both the tests. So if you're preparing for the CAT, all these dimensions of the test are by and large taken care of, the only difference being the general awareness section. Yes, another difference is the format of the test, the number of questions, which of course would be more of a physical dimension. It's the overall anatomy of the paper which is different. One basic difference being that CAT is an online test, whereas IFT is a paper-based test. But once you practice across similar domains of questions, I think by and large things are going to be in place for you. We were talking about the critical general awareness section. This section needs special thrust for IFT test preparation. Let's look at the suggested topics for the IFT general awareness section, particularly static dimensions, where I'm talking about international bodies, their locations, their functions, the leaders of each of these bodies. We're talking about major sports events. We talk about the Grand Slams. We talk about cricketing events. Any of these games, and it becomes important from an IFT point of view. Major political events, and not just limited to India, but spanning across the world and trying to capture the essence of political news across the globe. And economy-related events would also be important there. The preparation strategy would also be in place if you look at a three-step approach there. We have talked about concepts as step one, where we identified that quantitative ability and certain areas of verbal ability are more concept-driven. Application, which is true for all the areas of the test. Once you know a concept, once you're aware of a particular fundamental, then the next challenge is application of that particular concept. And test taking, since IFT is a paper-based test, or shall I say it has been a paper-based test, so we suggest that you practice across similar tests so that your efficiency goes up and your time management improves. Skills to be developed. Now, these are skills which are, I think, intrinsic to any test. One of them, the critical one, is time management. So we have seen the number of questions going down from 150 in 2009 and 10 to 118 in 2014. So I think on an average, if you look at approximately 120 minutes and as many questions, so 1 minute per question has been the thrust for the last few IFTs, which means that your time management has to be smart enough to ensure a balanced attempt across all sections. I think further, one has to understand that since the paper has been structured into different sections, each section becomes important from a cutoff perspective. So getting emotionally attached to any one section and then not respecting other sections may be suicidal. We suggest that you balance it out, you make sure that you have judiciously spread your attempt across all sections and you have come out as a more balanced test taker. Prioritization. Having said that all sections are important, we still need to have a starting point since we have an option of starting anywhere because of no sectional time limits. So prioritization is a huge concern. Which section should you therefore begin with? We typically suggest that you start with your strong areas so that you get a feel-good factor and it gets you going. You leverage on the inertia part and approach the test more optimistically. Balance between accuracy and speed. This is a standard concern for any test, in fact, that your effectiveness and efficiency have to go hand in hand. So being stuck with one question endlessly and then getting a result out of it is not the challenge. The challenge is to manage it, to have a closure in a certain time frame. And IFT, I think what one has seen over the years, a good pick would be above 50%, and I think a good performance would be around 45 to 50% in terms of marks. But this dimension varies from one year to another, so we really can't standardize it. Thank you so much, and we hope that this video has been able to give you some insight into the test, into the pattern of the test, into the preparation strategy, and how it differentiates from the CAC. Thank you.